develop. Should we pull up the presentation? So thanks for that introduction. I'm Rahul Kulkarni. I'm based in HOK's India office in Mumbai, and I work with our international offices to help coordinate projects in India. Today, I'm going to talk about a topic called adaptive urbanism, and this is a topic that's very close to my heart. I'm a master planner, urban designer myself, and what I wanted to just showcase here was probably an alternative approach of master planning that our team has been practicing across the world. And there are two case studies that I thought I could share, which might lead to some takeaways, hopefully. So with that, we'll get started. It's been used too many times. So just a quick definition, what is adaptive urbanism? When we say that, is what does that really mean? So in broad terms, it's actually a process of perpetual engagement and reiteration. So instead of coming up with one solution and one master plan that everybody has to abide by, the concept is that a master plan is never really finished, right? Because we come up with some assumptions based on the brief that we were given, but then things change, things adapt, right? A larger township or a mixed-use development, that goes through a lot of cycles and changes and the market dynamics, etc. So this process actually, this in a particular shape or a form, and that we call it like big urbanism, right? Like a big move. Or a grand gesture that probably is just only visible from the helicopter, for example. And when you're on the ground level, it's very hard to perceive those spaces. So what if there's a way to make a master plan or a concept that grows from within, and that becomes the design and the organizing principle? So that's what we're going to talk about. This particular project, it's in Europe, but it's very similar to the conditions we find ourselves in India. There's a lot of density here. There are two plots. It sits along a water body, and one of the plots is next to a beautiful garden, an existing garden. And this is about 14 acres on the north and 10 acres on the south, those two plots, which has an existing road in the middle. So we started with a very simple approach of, based on the volume that we're targeting on the design brief. So I'm not going to get into the technical aspects of it. What I wanted to showcase was, we started creating a new heart, for example, where the people are going to access it from primarily. And from there, we started connecting the points to the places that people would go from one point to another, intuitively. So instead of creating a big urban swoop or making people go somewhere, we were looking at ideas as to what path they might take, and what if we make that a little bit more permeable as we go, and we actually split that and take inspirations from the streets and the markets that exist over there. And then we start finding opportunities for signature towers, something that sits within sort of the heart of the development. And then create these edges that then start to become more and more permeable and start connecting with the urban fabric. So giving all of these parameters, and then we were testing the heights and making sure we have the right the right FAR on the site, and giving back the development goals that the client had. We came up with this master plan. So again, it's not a closeted, closed environment or a like a walled city, but it's actually very permeable. It's very open, and all of the parking is in the basements. We have these reds that you see are all the retail opportunities that are on different various levels, and then the residential and the commercial and the offices, they're all sitting together. So we created this really interesting sort of heart of the project that I believe could be a different way of thinking about master planning. So if we, for example, if we have something like this here, what typically tends to happen is we create these gigantic podiums for parking, and everything sort of becomes closed off. So instead of that, we were looking at an approach where things could be opened up more, and create an interesting way of organizing the same thing. So that led to this particular design solution with these signature towers that became the heart of the project. So that's the hotel tower that you see in the front. There's office tower in the back, and then residential and commercial at the base. The other way of looking at it, and I mentioned it just a little bit, is when you have a particular site, we tend to think of it just as that site. And from a master planning or urban design standpoint, it's very important to see how this particular site fits within the context. Because if everybody starts to do that, and everybody starts to looking at just their own site, then it becomes very difficult. It becomes sort of an island development that gets that sort of repeats itself. So you have so many islands together, but nobody's thinking of how to coexist. So this was a site outside of Bangalore that we did, and we were just wondering if this type of projects start coming up slowly as the agricultural land in India is getting converted into commercial development, and then slowly in 2040 you have all these different islands that are coming together. And nobody's sort of talking to each other. Every project is becoming a little island in itself. So with that thought, we were looking at a way to create something that will then start stitching the fabric together and allow for these sort of open spaces to start becoming the guiding principle for the development. So with that, there were like 4 approaches that the team took. One was like a central park, which is again the island development that I said, or the courts, which has its own different ideas. And the graphic is showing the grays being the built-up area, and the yellows being the open spaces, or an idea of having just simply a bands or maybe islands or something. So that was a very high level. We took the program that the client had given us as a brief, and then started organizing that brief on the site with these different typologies and ideas that we went through. So each concept had their own benefits, and there were some negatives, but as there were more deliberations, we came up with an idea of sort of combination of a central park and the islands, which we thought would be the way to stitch this fabric together. So we looked at different a lot of analysis went into the way it was being accessed, where would you park, and lots of different matrices that were then taken to see which one is the most flexible approach, etc. So with that, we came up with this particular approach. And again, here it's not about the buildings, it's about the master plan, it's about the open spaces that become the guiding principle for the overall development. So instead of creating a shape and putting open space in it, we had this was exactly upside down, and then we had these open spaces that connected to the surrounding areas as well. There was a beautiful lake next to it, which we connected to. And then again, the idea was to have a very permeable development, and then how do you start locating these buildings along these open spaces? How do the buildings actually relate to those open spaces? And then we created this series of walkways that then connect the project. And there was actually an existing road that cuts the site. So we had this elevated bridge walkways that would connect the 2 sides. And then that would eliminate people from going down onto the street, crossing the road, and going into the other side of this project. So. And then we started carving the buildings, and so how do you respond to the park? So what if all the buildings had an access to the park, and all of them had an sort of an internal address, not an external, not the vehicular drop-off, but an internal address. And then all these were intended to be sort of tech companies that would occupy this park. And the thought there was that there are these collaborations that happen within the open spaces. So the open space is not just a visual amenity, but actually it becomes the organizing principle, as well as a place for these people to kind of come together and speak to each other, and maybe there are new collaborations that happen. So we had these ideas about sky plazas and courtyards, and and then we did a lot of imagery analysis to see what was the right scale for it. This one is a street square in London, which is about a 33 meter, which which is, which feels just perfect with a 7 to 8 story buildings around it. That was the right scale that we determined. And then some ideas about these bridges that would connect the different sides of the project, and the circulation strategy, and where we see a very natural path that somebody will take from one point to another, and really create an environment for cross-pollination of ideas. That was the intention. And obviously very pedestrian friendly, all the vehicular traffic was on the outside. And we came up with a lot of imagery analysis for the client to then start developing the street patterns and different character areas, and how the buildings could relate, and how they could step down so that everybody had an access and views to the open spaces. And then finally the parking strategy, which obviously is prime importance in projects like these. So just sort of wrapping up this discussion about adaptive urbanism. What if so the idea is to create a solution that works with the shifting demands and external pressures. As we know, our market in real estate tends to be very dynamic. So the idea was to sort of have a master plan that continues to be able to adapt. This particular project is in London. This is a London Cancer Research Hub. And this was the design of the master plan. But instead of creating the open space within, we knew that outside of our site, there was going to be another precinct that will get developed in a very similar fashion. So we came up with ideas about having the open space such that even the other side can benefit from it. So that was the diagram that you see at the bottom. Those were the proposed developments that are coming along. And some ideas about how that park might feel like, and how you can be a container for lots of open spaces and ideas and activities within those. And then these are just some ideas about how this is a different project altogether, but again showing this idea of permeability and bridging across 2 or 3 different parcels, and how that can lead to a very interesting project. So this one is in Turkey, and this one is in Indonesia. That's all I had. Thank you.